In the early 1970s, Ecuador discovered oil beneath its rainforest. It should have been liberation. Energy meant leverage. Leverage meant independence. Independence meant a future written on its own terms. Instead, Ecuador entered a system that never announces itself. No soldiers arrived, no flags were raised, only economists, only paperwork, only conditions. In 1972, Ecuador began exporting oil at scale. Almost immediately, international lenders stepped forward. The money came quickly. The optimism came faster. The pitch was simple. Borrow now, build fast. Oil will pay for everything. Infrastructure would modernize the country. Revenues would cover the debt. Growth would lift everyone. But behind the development plans sat a quieter authority, one that doesn't build roads or pipelines itself, yet shapes how entire countries behave once the debt settles in. The International Monetary Fund. The IMF does not arrive first. It waits. It enters when projections fail, when revenues fall short, when optimism collides with arithmetic. Its role is not hidden. Its mandate is explicit. Stability, discipline, adjustment. But those words are not neutral. They decide who gets paid, who absorbs the shock, and how much sovereignty remains once the bill comes due. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Ecuador's debt had exploded. Oil prices fluctuated. Revenues shrank. Repayment schedules did not. That's when IMF involvement deepened. Loans were no longer just about infrastructure. They were about behavior. Budget cuts, public sector layoffs, subsidy removals, currency devaluation. These were not recommendations. They were conditions. Accept them or lose access to global credit markets entirely. This is where the story turns darker, not through secrecy, but through design. IMF structural adjustment programs were meant to restore confidence for lenders, but for ordinary Ecuadorians, they meant something else. Higher food prices, reduced healthcare spending, weakened labor protections, shrinking public services. The state tightened, the debt remained, and the IMF stayed. Years later, author John Perkins would describe this system in blunt terms. In Confessions of an Economic Hitman, he argues that institutions like the IMF function as the enforcement layer of a debt-based order, locking countries into cycles they struggle to escape. To be precise, Perkins's personal role is disputed. His book is not evidence, but his description of how leverage works aligns closely with what Ecuador experienced on paper. Debt first, adjustment second, control without occupation. The IMF does not need to overthrow governments. It doesn't need coups. All it needs is imbalance. Once a country depends on refinancing, policy sovereignty erodes quietly. Budgets are no longer written entirely at home. They are reviewed elsewhere. Democracy remains intact in form, but constrained in function. As Ecuador tightened its belt, oil extraction intensified. The rainforest absorbed the consequences, polluted rivers, destroyed ecosystems, displaced indigenous communities. The debt demanded revenue. The land provided it. The IMF never drilled a single well, but the pressure it applied made drilling inevitable. Ecuador was not conquered. It was conditioned. The IMF didn't arrive with force. It arrived with spreadsheets, and once a nation's survival depends on approval from outside its borders, sovereignty becomes negotiable. In our last video, we examined Venezuela and what that operation was really meant to signal, which raises a final question. Can Venezuela become the new Ecuador? Because once a country borrows against tomorrow, tomorrow belongs to someone else. And whether Venezuela can reclaim it under new leadership or merely trade one dependency for another remains to be seen.